You're tuned into the Writing Community Chat Show, the live streaming YouTube podcast that brings you the stories of authors, screenwriters, and more. Indie or established, this show's for the community, and we invite you to be a part of it. Head to the writingcommunitychatshow.com for more info. The WCCS. Together as one, we get it done.
Hello and welcome to the Writing Community Chat Show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Writing Community Chat Show. I'm very happy to be sat here as always, and I'm sat here with Chris, and we've got a great guest lined up for you tonight. And Chris, it's also Friday the 13th. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. How do you feel about that, Chris? First of all, sorry, before jumping into that, how are you doing? How's your week been?
Yeah, I'm good. I had no idea it was Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
which is strange because obviously I've got through most of the day without knowing that fact. Yeah, I mean, I'm not superstitious, so yeah, it doesn't add any sort of speculation.
Well, it might make a bit of sense to you and the viewers when I say that I was actually born on Friday the 13th.
Right.
Yeah, explains a few things, right?
Yeah, I mean, you do write horror, and yeah, you're sort of that way inclined. Your screenplay is a horror, so yeah, maybe there's more to be said about somebody who's born on the 13th.
Well, actually, I did a little digging today. Anna, thank you. That explains so much. Well, thank you, Anna. Yeah, I did a little digging, and Stephen King has actually got a phobia about this. Not about this, but actually the number 13 in general, probably linked to Friday the 13th. And it's called, I'm going to try and pronounce this, Triskaidekaphobia. So that's an actual phobia about the actual number 13. And that's apparently something Stephen King has, which was quite surprising to read because obviously he's got, again, a lot of horror in his writing. And I'm not sure if that's kind of connected to why he writes horror, but maybe you're onto something, Chris.
I'd love to write like a spoof of that, like a comedy horror novel about someone being scared of the number 13.
Yeah. But
yeah,
phobias are very strange because I don't think it's a phobia, but there's some reason not explained to me. I'm fine with spiders, but I can't stand moths, right? And my wife's auntie is terrified of buttons. And I think that's absolutely crazy because it's obviously like kind of preconditioned because you wouldn't one day think, oh, there's a button, I'm scared of that all of a sudden. So it must be there in your mind already. So is there anything you'll kind of have a phobia of?
E.T. obviously is the first one that comes to mind, but I think that's pretty fair, to be honest, because if something came from another planet and landed here and then was in your shed, then I think you have a right to be scared.
Yeah, but you were pressured into that, being scared of that because it was a circumstance that had happened to you, which explained why you were scared of it. So I think that's different, but yeah, okay.
I think most traumas, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think most traumas come from childhood, and I think that's so. It could be that your auntie swallowed a button and nearly died, and then as a result, has now has this fear of buttons. Could be that you were attacked by a moth as a baby, and nobody came to help you, and now you're terrified of moths. We just don't know, do we? Because our memories are too lucid. But yeah, 13 is a weird one.
It is. And the weird thing is, right, moths not terrified, scared. Recently I've overcome my fears and I've picked a few moths up and thrown them at the house. That's a big step for me, right? But butterflies, absolutely fine. Moths, no.
Yeah, I say rats as well, but again, it comes from fiction because I read James Herbert's The Rats, and that I read that way too young, and they ate a baby in the first few pages, and I was like, wow. This is terrifying. And then somebody from work actually sent me an otter. Did you see that story about otters in Malaysia that attacked a runner in a pack, and they were taking chunks out of her? Like they were literally, yeah. Like,
wow.
Apparently they'd taken chunks out of her arm and her legs and stuff like that, and they hunted in a pack of like they're all wild, obviously, but they've never attacked humans before in that area, and now they're actually doing it on a frequent basis. And someone sent it me and said, "Oh, this is just like the rats."
Wow.
Like,
Did you say otters?
Yeah.
How can they catch a runner?
You'll honestly look into it, because I was reading the article. She was just running in the park. She got attacked by wild otters, and like,
oh my god! Well, yeah. I'm gonna have to definitely look that up, because I can't quite picture that. Anna says butterflies can drink blood, but you're scared of moths. I had no idea they drink blood.
New fear unlocked.
There you go. Yeah, I don't think so. Anyway, we've got a great guest on tonight, Chris. We have. What I like about our guests is that we get to learn about them and their story and their kind of career. Often a lot of nuggets of advice in there. And our guest tonight has got not only a great career path, but also has a lot of coaching experience about life experience and stuff. And I think that's really translatable into the world of an author, because we deal with a lot of we know a lot of authors live in a kind of a recluse life, and they deal with their procrastinations and those sorts of things. So I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from that alone, but also from his journey into the writing world that he's done now. So I want to get a guest on and not talk too much about butterflies sucking blood and attacking otters attacking runners, which I think is absolutely incredible. But I will check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, tonight's guest, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's the first professional athlete that we've had on the show. And I think, like you said before, there's so many traits in a professional athlete that would just work perfectly with the world of being a writer, in terms of, your commitment, your drive, your vision, having to sit there for long hours and type at your computer, and, the pressure that you get when you send your work out into the world. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And NFL season has just started, if you're into that, which obviously I think a lot of people watching tonight and listening to today will be into the NFL season. So it'd be good to speak to an American about that, because for me, as a Brit, watching it at sort of Sunday evenings on occasion, still trying to figure out all the rules. I'm keen to learn.
Yeah, it is. Oh, I'll talk about that with our guest, but yeah, it's definitely grown in the UK at the moment. So I'm going to introduce our guest. So tonight we have a truly remarkable guest joining us, someone whose journey has taken him from the NFL, as Chris mentioned, to the world of children's literature, which I think is a really interesting sort of direction change. He's not only known for his professional stand-up performances as a professional football player with the San Diego Chargers and Dallas Cowboys, but he's also making waves as a debut author. His first children's book, When Two Homes Feel Like One, is a powerful and heartwarming guide for children navigating the complexities of divorce. But that's not all. He's also a motivational speaker and executive coach, sharing his insights on mental health, perseverance, and overcoming adversity. His incredible career shift from fast-paced world of professional sports to writing inspiring stories for young readers is something we can't wait to dive into. So please join me in welcoming the multi-talented Trey Battle. Hello, Trey. Welcome to the show.
Hey, guys. Thanks.
We're so excited to chat to you, Trey. First of all, how are you doing?
I'm actually doing pretty well. It's been a good day.
Yeah, good. I like to hear that. And where in the world are you joining us from?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Atlanta. See, when I think Atlanta, I just think of The Walking Dead, because that's kind of the only thing I know about it. Yeah, brilliant. We've got a couple of Americans who tune into the show, which we love, and they've been great supporters of our show since day one. I think even sometimes skipping off work to kind of catch the show, which is incredible for us. But yeah, it seems to be a great place for creativity and athleticism, like we're going to chat about, and especially with the colleges and things like that. So it's definitely a different culture to what we're experiencing. So it's really good to kind of dig into your sort of knowledge of that. So apart from being a new writer, have you experienced any sort of community kind of support with that in your area? Is there much of a writer scene that you're aware of yet?
So in terms of writer scenes, there's something that I'm still trying to navigate. I am beginning to get in different people's groups on like Facebook and just writer circles, and getting in contact with other authors just to get a sense of, what are the things I'm doing right? What are some things that I can do better? one of the things that I have recently had to do was to really dive into character development, which I really didn't have experience with. I mean, I was born a character. Like, you just ask any of my grade school teachers. I spent all of grade school in the corner, so I was born a character. But developing another character is something that was relatively novel to me, no pun intended. So definitely really getting into reaching out to other authors and seeing what they have to say.
Yeah. One thing I'm really interested about, and we're going to play the video in a minute, and we're going to go to round one, which is looking at your career to the point where you are now, which is interesting. But I'm really interested to know that it's such a career shift, and having been a professional sportsman and then moving into the coaching world and then jumping into becoming an author, which I think is a really good switch up, but also into children's books, which again is probably something not many people expected that might be in your circle. So maybe my first question is really, did any of your kind of former NFL or any kind of sort of teammates you had, even your coaches, kind of reach out to you in surprise that you'd taken that step?
No, not really, because the subject matter or the topics of my book really are in alignment with my heart and how other people view me. And interestingly enough, there is another former. I went to college at the University of Georgia, and I had he's a bit younger than me, but another footballer, an American footballer. I know I have to make that distinction. But by the name of Malcolm Mitchell, who played for the Patriots, won the Super Bowl. He actually had an interesting story of how he overcame illiteracy to going to college, playing in the NFL, winning a Super Bowl, and he also wrote a children's book. So when I came, began to even think about going down this path, he was one of the first people I reached out to.
Yeah, I bet. Incredible story.
Yeah, no, it really is. Trey, when you said about when I even began to think about going on this path, can you remember what that was like when you first thought, you know what, I'm going to write? And where did that bug for writing come from?
Absolutely. So like you guys mentioned earlier, I deal a lot in the mental health space. And I was up at the University of Virginia speaking at a mental health campaign, public awareness campaign, rather. So it was the Mental Health Crisis Public Awareness Campaign. It's a mouthful. And I was riding with this professor, Dr. Williams, and he posed a question. It was a simple question. He was doing research and work in a high violence area in Virginia. And he said, Trey, do you ever think about what happens or what it does to a child's psyche in a high crime area where they're playing on the court, or as you say, on a pitch, right? And some violent act happens that night, and there's an investigation, and you have the police tape, and maybe it's even a chalk outline. And within the next couple of days, that child goes back out, and they're playing on that field where a murder or some crime scene just happened. He said, do you ever ponder what that does to a child's psyche? And in the moment, I thought, well, no, I don't. And then I left, came back home, and that question just resonated. It almost began to ruminate until it was, well, I have to do something about this. And what he was describing is what we call in the field ACEs, ACES. So it's adverse childhood experiences. And I thought, how can I make an impact on the psyche of children who undergo or have to go through these ACEs? Like, what can I do to make an impact on it? And so I said, well, what if I started writing children's books about some of these things that happen in their lives? So it gives them a way to, one, relate to a fictional character, but two, open their eyes and open their minds and build that courage to actually start asking questions about, well, this happened to that character and I feel the same way. What are some of the things that I can do about it? And that's when the bug hit me. It all started with that question.
Nice. I like that. It's always good, isn't it? And it's one of those questions, like you said, it really resonates and sticks with you, that kind of makes the impact. So there's plenty out there that kind of do that. And the industry I work in at the moment is helping people who've gone down a bit of a bad path. And the one that I try to leave imprinted on their mind is what do you want people to remember you as? And that's terribly bad because they're quite young, but also like kind of what is your legacy, or who are you? And that question of who are you, when someone actually stops and thinks about that, really, it gets deep, you know, and that's when you start coming up with, what do I want to kind of leave behind, or what do I want people to know me as? So I think those questions are really kind of pivotal to make that change, or to make that, or make anybody want to kind of change things and leave an impression. Yeah, cool. Right, what we're going to do is we're going to play the very quick part 1 video, and we're going to look at your kind of career up to where you are now, and not kind of an extent, because we haven't got time for the extensive career that you've got, but kind of some of the highlights and kind of what led you to get to the writing world, which you're in now. So part 1 coming right up. Halo says that's a really admirable purpose. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so looking back, I mean, was there anything kind of dragging you into the writing world before your NFL career, or during your writing time? Do you remember the first time that writing was a kind of a little spark in your brain? Apart from, obviously you just kind of described that as the question, but was there anything before that, or was it literally that one time that kind of led you to it?
No. So I I got to go all the way back to high school, where I had this English teacher by the name of Miss Evans, and it was just something about her class, more so than any other writing class that I had throughout my grade school career. And it was almost like, naturally, I'm a scientific type of mind. I love math. I love chemistry. I love things like that. But in this class, she provided this pathway to take my scientific reasoning and apply it to, writing. Now, I'm not saying that I was, contemplating writing, like James Patterson's novels or something like that, some mystery novels. But she took my strengths and took it to and allowed me to utilize it in ways that, really highlighted my strengths in writing. And I remember my freshman year of college, she had left me, well, that was my junior, senior year, but she gave me this writing journal with all these tips and notes that she had given us, over the 2 years I was in her class, because I took her twice. And I get to college, English 101, and one of the first assignments is to write a paper. And I pull out my notebook and I'm going through all the things that, all the tips that she had given me in high school. And I made an A on my first paper in college. And it was crazy because every other student had made horrible marks, just horrible marks. And I remember the professor coming up to me and saying, you're a great writer. Did you ever think about doing this before? Because we never have a freshman to make an A on the first paper. I'm like, no, I really don't ever think about writing, but thanks for, thanks for the comment. But it was that teacher in high school who really opened up the door for me to believe that I could be a great writer. And it was just because probably she just had that confidence in me and just poured into me. So that was really the first, I guess, taste of writing for me.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yeah, Trey, I'm really interested because obviously you're talking there about being in high school. And I'm guessing, obviously, you're a very committed and dedicated guy. And no matter what it is that you do, you seem like you're either all in or you're not at all. So how did you navigate that passion that you had for lots of different things in high school, where at some point there becomes an avenue where it goes, I have to commit everything to this, even though I've got an interest in this, and this. What did you do in that situation?
Well, I guess in that situation, I was almost forced into it because I mean, there were a lot of things that I was good at in high school, even in college. But there was one instance when, I don't know, anytime someone tells me I can't do something or they don't believe in me, that automatically becomes my number one priority to prove that person wrong. And in my senior year, I thought that I was going to go on and play football in college. I thought I was going to get a scholarship to play football in college, and it didn't happen. And it was maybe 4 to 5 schools who I thought were going to offer me this free education, and then end up not happening. And so from that moment on, because people didn't believe in me, they said that I couldn't do it, automatically my main focus, my main priority was to be an American footballer, right? And nothing else mattered to me at that point. I had to prove the world wrong. I guess an analogy would be I had chips on my shoulders, and I mean like the biggest Dorito you can ever think of. That's the size of the chips that were on my shoulder. And that's typically my motivation when someone says, "Nah, I don't think so," or "Yeah, you're not fit for this." It's like, screw you, I'm going for it.
Yeah. See, I read that you're like 5'10", right?
5'11". Give me my
5'11".
inch.
So even up there. But then you were considered too small for NFL, right?
Oh yes, absolutely. I was considered too small for college. So how that conversation went was, it was when you're being recruited by universities to play sports, you have a recruiting coach, and over here you were able to go on what we call unofficial visits, and that meant whatever game that they were playing, whatever sporting event there was at the university, you could call your recruiting coach and say you wanted to come, and you would get 4 free tickets. And that meant that I was the man. Like, I was the man in high school. All my boys were, "Hey, Trey, they're playing this school next week. You think you can get us tickets?" Of course, you know who I am. You know, don't test it. You know what I can do. I'm the guy. And so I called him and I asked for tickets to this particular game. And he says, "Yeah, we can give you tickets, but I'm glad you called because I had to let you know something." And I knew that was a red flag, because he had never said, "I'm glad you called." Because when I called, I was typically asking for something. And we all have people in our lives like that. When you see their name come up on the caller ID, it's like, what do they want? So I know that's how he looked at me. But when he said he was glad that I called, automatic red flag. And what he told me was, he said, "Trey, I want you to know that we're not going to give you a scholarship to our school, because we're going to offer scholarships to other players who are more attractive size-wise." That means I wasn't big enough, I wasn't fast enough, nor was I strong enough to be considered what they wanted as their prototypical athlete on their team. And essentially that happened at every school. So that's how that conversation went. I was not big enough to play sports in college, but I had to prove them wrong.
Yeah. It's incredible.
Trey, do you think... Sorry, Chris, I was just going to say, do you think that's ultimately what has led to you having problems with your mental health, in terms of not the negatives that were thrown at you, because obviously you've got all the determination, like you said, the chips on your shoulder to prove everybody wrong. But do you think it's that aspect of your personality, in terms of proving everyone wrong, the time and effort and dedication and commitment that it takes to get to that point? Do you think that is what ultimately took its toll on your mental health?
Absolutely. So there's this phrase that they use in nutrition, is everything in moderation. So too much of anything can become a bad thing. And so when I got into this mindset of being told that, I wasn't big enough, fast enough, or strong enough, I heard that. But what I internalized was, you aren't enough. You aren't good enough. And so that's what I carried from that 17-year-old kid up into, 27, 30 years old, to where I hit my breaking point. So the answer to that question is absolutely yes. That's where it started.
Could I know we're going into that mental health kind of direction at the minute, but I want to just go back to talking about the scholarship side of things. I'm not very well versed on the education system in America. So if you were in that position where you can't get kind of your football scholarship, does that mean then you no longer have access to the kind of education system?
No, you do. It just becomes a lot more expensive.
Okay.
So
Wow.
instead of having a free education paid through your, servitude to athletics,
Yeah.
you have to pay for school, and that's something that, just my background really didn't have the money for. So
Yeah, of course.
it's expensive.
Yeah. Wow. Cool.
Mm.
Not cool. Just cool.
Yeah, cool that you overcame it.
Yeah.
So obviously we were going down the mental health route, but I'm going to kind of tie into the topics that you're writing about and sort of mental health in terms of like, I would see the topics that you're writing about as quite adult topics that you'd probably have to have some life experience to understand. But then obviously what you're doing is taking that and trying to help children understand it, to improve their experiences of similar situations. So how do you do that as a writer? How do you take something that's so complex and that would be seen by a lot of people as no, that's an adult conversation, talking about divorce and talking about separation. We need to sugarcoat it. We need to, make sure that the kids are happy at all times. And, we say niceties of going, oh, you've got 2 houses now and that's all the positives and things like that. So how do you take something like that as a writer and help children through it?
Yeah. So what we have to understand is, and I'm going to echo something that you said in the opening, Chris. It was about phobias, and what you said was a lot of times the things that we're afraid of in adulthood are from instances that occurred when we were children. And so when you say we take these adult situations and we try to break it down into something that's palatable for children, well, it's really meant for us all, because as adults we're all dealing with things. There is no one who's walking this planet or even swimming the planet who hasn't had some form of I guess adversity. Right. And a lot of times, even as adults, we don't fully understand how to navigate those things. And so when I present these topics in this book series, not only are we creating a pathway for children to begin to vocalize and communicate some of these emotions that they're having that are otherwise suppressed, we're allowing adults to look in the window of their childhood and say, wait a second, I do remember this, and I do remember feeling that way. And it leads the way and opens the door to have so much more vulnerable conversations and honest conversations. Because in the world that we live in today, an honest conversation is much harder to come by. And on top of that, the things that our young people have to navigate today is completely different than what we had to navigate when we were younger, because they're exposed just to so much more. And when we think, well, they're children, they'll get over it, they really don't understand. They've been understanding for a while, and they just been waiting for someone to have those conversations with them. And as adults, sometimes I'm even taken aback to like, wow, you know that? You experience that? You know how to communicate that? And so I'm really trying to bridge that gap between adulthood and children and form an environment where not only we can help each other, but open the pathways of communication to build healthier futures, one for the adult and two for the child.
I imagine it's a lot of emotional trauma that kind of gets triggered as we're older, that kind of snaps back into that kind of, those feelings flood back as well. So was there any kind of conscious decision to navigate that, or was it kind of, as you write the children's book, you were quite happy to write the story as you kind of naturally found it?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, you're asking, how did I come about the topics, or okay?
Yeah, sorry, I find myself completely rambling tonight, and I've no idea why. But yeah, so basically, like I was saying, there's a lot of emotional trauma. I think what you're talking about is that when people grow up and they've dealt with stuff when they're young and might have forgotten about that, and they tap into your story, then it kind of opens that conversation because they relate to it as well. Is there any kind of decision that maybe that could have been triggering to the adults perhaps, or not? Or is that a thing that's not really a concern for the children's story?
Well, when we use that term triggered, what I like to think of is a lot of times in adulthood, we have instances or we have situations where things are triggered. And the reason counseling and therapy is a profession for a reason. And it's typically happening percentage-wise with adults more so than children. And so when we think of this word triggered, it's already happening. And what happens is when we get into these counseling or we get into these therapy sessions, let's say we're in our mid 30s, early 40s, we're now having to backtrack through 2 decades of information just to get back to the core of what happened, to bring healing, build a sturdy foundation, excavating those things per se, just to get on with our lives. And so when you use the word triggers, I want those things to be triggered, because if they don't happen now, when we're reading this book or when we're conversing with our children or our youth, it's going to happen eventually. And the reason that I wrote it in the children form instead of written for adults is because what would happen for the youth of our future if we address these topics and we address these situations, these traumas, as close as soon as possible, as opposed to waiting years for things to almost scab over, and it goes to the recesses of our minds, and we have to have a breakdown just for it to go back. And a perfect example of it is, I don't know if you guys are aware, but there was a school shooting here in America last week. So there was a 14-year-old boy who killed 4 people in his school with an assault style rifle. It just so happened that happened 14 miles from my house. So literally a 20-minute drive. And most people will say, well, this event happened. But very few people will ask, what happened in that child's mind? What happened over the 14 years of his life that would trigger him to commit such an act? And those are the types of conversations that I'm trying to have before something happens. How do we form a community of support, a community of care, a community of love, I guess, before those incidents like that happen, before those triggers occur? So if we can have a community to impact the individual, we can minimize the individuals that have such a damning effect on the community.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a great answer to my awkward question. Thank you.
Yeah, Trey, I want to stay in the mind, because obviously you just talked a little bit there about obviously what's happened in that person's mind. And I want to see if we can tap into what happened in your mind, because I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong at any point, but you had a dream of being an NFL footballer. That happens. You have your career. And then when that dream ends, I'm guessing you have a dip in your mental health. So how do you reinvent yourself? And what would you say to somebody who's found themselves in a really difficult position after achieving their dream, and then the dream's over, and then it's, what do I do now? How do I go about it? Because I worked every single day of my life for 10 years or whatever to get to that point, and now it's over. What advice would you give to them in that situation?
Yeah, that's a huge mistake that I made at the end of my career. And what I tell people now is it's almost a reminder of who you are is not what you do. So the work of my hands doesn't define who I am as an individual. And to truly understand that, to get to the root of that, you have to understand your why has to be greater than your what. Meaning why you're doing something has to be more significant than what you are doing. And those were the questions that I never asked. And one major question that I never asked myself was, once I achieve these things, Now what? Now what? All right. You wanted to be a football player. You wanted to prove the world wrong. You wanted to do all these things from an athletic perspective. Now what? And when we think of terms of timelines, when I retired from the NFL, I was 25, 26 years old, something like that. In the game of football, we play 4 quarters. I was still in the first, maybe second quarter. I didn't even think about halftime, second quarter, fourth quarter. And God forbid if we went into overtime. And so I never thought about who I was going to be after I was an athlete. And that's a question that I had to learn to ask myself when it was almost too late. And I learned to ask myself that question honestly through therapy. So it was a rough transition, to say the least.
Yeah. I did watch a really interesting video on that, and obviously we don't need to go into that at the moment. But it's something that not to the extent that you've been through. And when I left the forces many years ago, it was being so consumed by something and finding that was your purpose, to suddenly lose that purpose, I think was the real key for me, where I struggled for a long time, where finding that purpose again was the difficult part. And what was the hard part? Because without that purpose of what you thought you were, you kind of feel lost. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly what I was navigating. So I picked up so many things on the football field, just learning how to be a great teammate, learning how to be a cheerleader when needed, learning how accountability truly feels, right? And I learned all these things, and they were core tenets to who I was, and being supportive, being a coach when I needed to be a coach. And so even though I was learning all those things in the game of football, that's what I was doing. But why I was doing it is because those things brought me fulfillment.
Yeah.
Being a coach, being a good teammate, being a great cheerleader, being an encourager. And so when I finally retired from football, I had to tap into that core, those things that brought me joy. And I had to find a career that allowed me to express those things. And so that's why it goes back to why your why has to be greater than your what. What I was doing was playing football. Why I was doing it is because those things made me happy. And when you talk about transitioning from career to career, it doesn't matter what the what is. It doesn't matter the work of your hands. As long as that why brings you fulfillment, you get joy from what you're doing. Those are the things that matter most, your why.
Yes. And then obviously post NFL or football, you went into coaching and life coaching and talking to people and helping them through potentially their transitions as well. How did you get into that kind of line of work? And do you feel, obviously with experience, you get better at things? And did you feel like when you started that, perhaps you were making a big impact, but now you're more experienced and you've got that feedback that now you're making a big impact? Or how was that transition for you, and how did you get on with it?
Yeah, that took about 10 years for me to figure out. It wasn't just a flip of the switch and it happened. So when I retired and I went through therapy, I was in a phase of my life where I was trying to reach that high still.
Yeah.
And what I did was I thought, okay, what's a career field that's going to give me as much prestige and as much financial gain as playing in the NFL? And the brilliant thought that I had at the peak of Mount Stupid was, oh, just become a doctor. And so I went back to school. I went back to university, and I worked in an operating room almost every night from 2 to 10:30 every night. But I went to school every morning from about 8 to 1. And so I'm putting in 16, 18-hour days as trying to do homework at the end of the day. And I was running myself ragged. And so at the end of that, I don't think there are any across the pond, as they say, or it used to be actually. I started working for this company called Chick-fil-A. And in Chick-fil-A, I was directing 2 locations and had a employee team of somewhere between 300 and 350 employees.
Wow.
And it was about a $15-16 million operation. And I was growing leaders and working with people and doing all these things. And then after that, I started working at a church actually. And I was still using this skill set of coaching and growing and leading. And then it just came to the point of, oh, this is your core. That's what you like to do. All right, now let's really make a career out of it. And so over the course of about a decade, I evolved into understanding that's my why, that's my core. And that's how I really got into coaching.
Amazing.
Would you say, Trey, that with that in mind, that you found your purpose? Or so essentially, is your purpose helping people, but in lots of different avenues? Or do you still think there's a part of you that's still trying to find that purpose, but you're getting closer to it because you've found, oh, I enjoy this, I enjoy that, I enjoy this?
No, I think that since I found my why, and I go back to something that I said earlier, it doesn't matter what the what is, as long as I understand my why and I'm driving towards my why. And so even though I can help different people, it all goes back to that investigative mind that I was talking about as a teenager. I love problem solving, and part of problem solving is asking the right questions. And when you're coaching someone, that's 100% of the job, asking the right questions, because people tend not to ask themselves the hard questions. We really have the tendency to take the most efficient route, and that's the nice way to put it. The honest way to put it is we're going to take the easy way 100% of the time, whatever causes us the least amount of strain. And so in coaching, I get to be investigative. I get to hear people's problems. I get to hear what they're trying to navigate. And then I'm now able to ask them the hard questions, the questions that maybe they wouldn't ask themselves, or the questions that they really don't have the mental capacity to ask themselves. It's easy to look in the mirror and put on a filter and say, yeah, I'm good. I can do this. It's just one more day. But if it's deteriorating our mental health, then we need someone to help us coach. You need someone to help coach you through those things that are going on in life. So that's when you ask that question, that's immediate what I think. It doesn't matter the person, doesn't matter the situation, as long as I can be investigative and be empathetic, hear what the person is truly saying, and then ask them the right questions to help them navigate that situation.
In that situation, then, are you protected by your why? Because obviously, I should imagine being a coach to people and taking on people's problems and hearing what they're saying and trying to find solutions, I can imagine that could potentially be quite damaging to your own mental psyche if you're not in a place where you can absorb that and then sort of redistribute it as positive energy, I suppose. So what have you done to build that sort of protection? Is it through things that you've done on the day-to-day? Is it routines that you're in that you constantly do to look after your own mental health? What advice would you give to people in that sort of realm?
Yeah, so what you're describing right now is what we call in the field compassion fatigue. When we're constantly pouring out and helping other people, the problem is if we're not refilling, there is no pouring out. It's like having your car, right? Electric or gasoline, whatever. I think you guys say petrol over there, right?
Yep.
Right. So if you want to go on a road trip, like you have to fill it up. You have to fill it up. And at some point in that journey, if it's getting on E and you don't refill, the journey's going to end prematurely. And so it's the same when you're helping someone navigate something in their lives. Yeah, we can help them traverse whatever it is that they're dealing with, but at some point we have to refill. And that's what I really make sure that I do, because I have to refill it, whether it's just taking time off, whether it's reading a good book, whether it's getting a coach, because that's something that I learned in coaching. Every good coach has a coach.
Yeah.
Right? Every good trainer has a trainer. So if you're seeking services from someone and they don't do the things that they're coaching you to do or they're advising you to do, it's a good possibility that they're not really that good at what they do. So you need to look for someone else. So always practice what you preach.
So when you'd gone through your football career and then you found your why in terms of coaching people and helping people, what made you jump? Obviously, we know why you jumped into the writing world and decided to write children's books, but what was the step that you took? Because you've been published as well, or been signed. So how did you approach that kind of hurdle? And how did it get into becoming, or even with the conversation started, for you to get that kind of signing from a publisher?
Yeah, so the conversation started with an author that I know. So I was working on my master's of psychology, and it was a lady in my cohort. She was a teacher actually in Michigan, and she was telling us a little bit of her story because we were practicing the coaching techniques. And she shared her story. She's a mother with two children with autism, and her passion is the autistic population. And so she wrote a book for her children. And I just got so interested in it. And so I started asking her questions. Like, well, why did you write the book? And what were the benefits of the book? And how did you do it? And she's a self-publisher. So initially, I was going to self-publish. So she had given me the blueprint. I had found her I was going to use her illustrator. I was going to use her editor. I was going to use her printer. And but I was having this conversation with one of my coworkers. Really, I call her my mentor. She's called the Heart Doctor, who is a coach. Her name is Dr. Dawn Kier. And I was telling her about this journey that I was about to start in self-publishing this book. And she said, "You really want to write a book?" I said, "Yeah, that's what I want to do." And I told her my why behind it. She said, "It's interesting. There's someone I want you to meet." And our mutual friend, who is now my publisher, Beverly, with Inkwell Publishers, she invited us both to breakfast. And I was telling her my story, and Beverly was telling me her story. And instantaneously, it popped off. I was like, yeah, I'm not self-publishing. I need to work with you.
Yeah.
And she had the equal sentiment. And so what's even better is when I met her, she was actually transitioning from a for-profit publishing house to a nonprofit publishing house. And their slogan is "Stories with a Purpose." And I'm thinking, it couldn't be any more synergistic.
Yeah.
And so she was transitioning to nonprofit, Stories with a Purpose. I felt wholeheartedly that my stories had a purpose. And I gave her the vision for, this 5-book series that I was writing the manuscripts for. And she said, "You know what? I want to work with you. I want to be a part of this journey." And that's how I ended up with a publisher, going from about to self-publish to now being signed.
Fantastic. That is a perfect segue into the part 2, because we are going over our segment time slightly. So if we jump into part 2, we can learn all about that book and this series, because I'm really intrigued to know how that kind of was pitched and developed. So part 2 video right here. Let's get into it. Anya says, "That's a wonderful story," and I completely agree. Okay, so what's the story? Could you tell us all about book 1? And I really want to find out how you kind of already decided it's going to be a big series book, rather than just kind of how you decided. How did you get there? So let us know about book 1 first, please.
Yeah, so book 1, When Two Homes Feel Like One. It's a journey through divorce. And how I got to that topic, it's actually 5. So initially they're going to be five books. And this is honestly how it happened. I'm an investigator. I have a scientific mind. So when I finally made a decision that, all right, I'm going to write a book, the next question was, what's the book going to be about? And so I created a questionnaire. And I sent it out to everyone that I knew from coast to coast, north to south, all across the country. And it got about 50 responses, 50 plus responses. And, I tallied up the data, and there were 5 resounding topics that came out. And the question was, what are the issues or what are the traumatic experiences that youth which you work with are dealing with? And the top 5 things were the top 5 ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, were divorce, neglect and abandonment, bullying, loss of a loved one because of the COVID pandemic. We lost a lot of people. And the 5th one was sexual abuse. And I thought, wow, okay, that's it. Those are my first 5 topics. Those are the books that I'm going to write. And initially, when I was going to self-publish, I wanted to do, because I was thinking, our children, I need cartoons. They need to be characters, maybe animals, make up something. And the second question in that survey is, what do students you work with most like to see in books? And it was a resounding, my students say that they want to see characters in books that look like them. And I was thinking, okay, nix the animals, nix all of those things. They want to see pictures of students that look like them. And in America, honestly, we live in a globalized world. Yeah. And so I thought, all right, this is going to have to be a multicultural book series. And so from, mixed, what we call biracial children, Hispanic, Middle Eastern, Asian, I try to get in I try to be as inclusive as possible in these book series. But the first book, it's about divorce, because that's honestly one of the major ACEs that a lot of people don't think about, because divorce is such a high statistic in American society. So 50% of all marriages end in divorce. So half of the marriages who have children, right? Their children are dealing with this. And so how do we have the conversations with these children who are dealing with divorce to set them on a healthy mental trajectory?
Must be really difficult as an American author, just because of how my perception anyway of America is that the country is so divided. So I could imagine if you wrote a novel like this and then said, look, this book's coming out, a lot of people go, that's brilliant, that's a great idea, and I would be one of those people. But then you would probably get a lot of people go, you're feeding into the divorce sort of pattern, like people should stay together, religions say families should stay together. By writing a book about divorce, you're fueling that's okay and that's acceptable. So how do you navigate sort of the positives and negatives of writing a book in this realm and in this topic? Obviously, knowing that you're doing a great thing by writing about it, but also you could be projecting a lot of heat from unwanted areas as an author as well.
Yeah, I can understand that. So the first thing is, we have to understand, whether I write the book or not, divorce is a problem. It's a problem. And so I can be cautious and say, all right, I'm not going to broach that topic. Or I'm going to say, for the children who are, or the families who are affected by divorce, I'm going to provide a resource that can help them. And by being silent, it's almost allowing these children to go on through life holding on to these traumatic experiences. And I don't want to make that mistake. And honestly, in this situation, the only mistake that you can truly make is to not say something, because we live in a world where we're all heightened, everyone's alert is on 100. And we say this phrase, if you see something, say something. But when it comes to the matters that most directly affect us, it's like we all of a sudden become silent for some reason, right? If I'm not going to be part of the solution, then I'm part of the problem. And I'm not going to be part of the problem. So I'm going to provide a possible solution. And if that comes with backlash, it comes with backlash. But if it has the potential to actually help a family, to help a child, to even help an adult, then it was worth it, regardless of the heat that I take.
That's a really interesting thing you mentioned there, where it could help a child or help an adult? Because a lot of, like, say, the children's films you see in cinemas now, or wherever that might be, they really focused on the children's story, but also put a lot of comedy and elements in to please the adult, because it's been a massive increase lately, and it's very enjoyable. So was there a conscious decision to actually put elements of this story in to really connect with the adults any differently than the message that was being portrayed for the child?
Absolutely. But I didn't put it in the literature portion per se. So at the end of every book, there are what I call discussion starters. And there are 10 questions that the adult can ask the child that really creates an environment for non-judgmental and safe conversation.
I love
And so
that.
they're almost like toss-up questions, because a lot of times as adults, people in general, a lot of times when we don't know what to say, we just don't say anything at all. And so if I provide these questions at the end of the book to just begin the conversation, it makes it a little bit easier to make that transition from silence to communicating, because it's so hard to have these conversations when you don't feel like you're really equipped to have the conversation. And then once the first couple of questions are asked, and you receive those responses, then it's like, oh, I didn't know you felt that way. Well, what about this? And what about that? And you can go on through the rest of the 10 questions. Or you can ask, if you have other children from an adult perspective, hey, little Millie feels this way. Do you feel the same way? And that really begins to strengthen that family bond, whether it's in 2 homes or 1.
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea. I think that's great. With 5 books in planned in the series, then have you thought past that? And is children's book writing kind of what you've thought of at the moment, or have you actually had thoughts of doing something else, maybe adult fiction or something else, or memoir? Have you thought about anything else in terms of writing?
Yeah. So my publisher doesn't even know this, honestly. So simultaneously, I am writing what I call a resilience journal. And if you've been following me on social, this is the first time I said this out loud. All right. No one but my social media manager knows this. All of the resilience reflections that I am saying daily on social are days from my resilience journal. And so it's a sneak peek into the first couple of months of the questions that I'm asking before I publish my journal. So yes.
Nice.
You can check those out on Instagram. They're fantastic. I've been binging those recently, and I love them. Certainly the kind of content I read. Very much into those sort of books at the moment. So that would hopefully that'll be out soon, so I can get into that. Yeah, I love the sound of that, and thanks for sharing that with us. If you guys have got questions to Trey, please send them in now, because we're pushing our time, because there's so much we could ask here. So if you have got questions, send them in. We'll get onto our part 3 soon. Chris, any more questions on the book series at the moment?
Yeah, you kind of asked the question that I was going to ask. So yeah, we'll move on to the community questions.
There you go. Brilliant. So send your questions in, guys, and we will ask our staple questions of the show. So part 3 is coming right up. So, Trey, we've got some random show questions that we love to ask our guests. And the first one being, if you could take any character from the world of fiction, whether that be a TV show, a movie, or a book, and put maybe that character into one of your novels, or pushing beyond that, spend the day with a fictional character, what fictional character would you choose and why?
All right. One of my favorite childhood stories, The Goonies.
Oh,
I
yes.
love it. I love The Goonies. And so I think my spirit character is Sloth from The Goonies. I'm so serious. I resonate so well with Sloth because, on the outside, he's just this figure. People are afraid of him. And I feel like if we were to take our masks off sometimes, we would look a lot like Sloth. But in our hearts, I mean, his heart was pure as gold. Like, he was a part of the Fratellis, but he wasn't a part of the Fratellis. And he helped them, get the treasure. So if I could spend a day with anyone, I would spend a day with Sloth, because I think weird is cool.
Yeah,
Nice.
well, that's a great answer. What would you do with him if you were spending the day with him?
Man, in true Goonies spirit, they were adventurers. And I don't even know how I thought about this, but one thing that I've never done, I've never been on a hot air balloon. And since Sloth was locked up in the basement of that, I mean, that's what I know from the movie. Since he was always locked up, and whenever he got out, he just seemed like this, from the baby roof to swinging from the rope. I would want to go on a hot air balloon ride with Sloth, just to see his expressions and see the joy that comes.
I think you should write that story. That sounds amazing. I love that answer.
Brilliant. There's some questions coming in. So if we get some of them up, because I know, obviously, as an ex-footballer, you might be a stickler for time, because time is precious in the NFL. So, yeah, we'll just squeeze them in, Chris. Get them in.
Oh, go on, then. Halo says, thank you for your question. What skills from football have you carried over into the writing and promoting mental health?
Great question. What skills from football? Okay, so in football, you take a lot of hits, physically and emotionally. But perseverance is one of the things that you had to have, because, I mean, you could be losing dramatically, in the first half of the game, but you can make some shifts, you can make some changes. And towards the end of the game, you could be driving with a chance to win at the goal line, right? At the end of the game. And so perseverance is something that is extremely needed in mental health. So, and I know we didn't get to it, but in my personal story, there was a time where I almost chose suicide because my perseverance waned. And so, if there's one thing, I just pinpoint it to one thing, boil it down rather to one thing. It's that perseverance, because I believe mental health is not the ability to stay out of the darkness, but it's the ability to sit present in the darkness, knowing that the light will shine again. So, perseverance.
What a great quote that is. Love that. Thanks for that question. Okay, Anya, thank you for your question. If you could find any pirate treasure or hidden treasure, what would it be aside from the Goonies treasure?
Interesting. So, I like treasure, and I'm going to nerd out for a little bit here. I have a coin collection. And so if I could find just like a super rare coin, it would be so special. It was like they didn't even know this existed. Maybe from, I don't know, currency from historic China or something like that. It's like, well, this is from whatever dynasty, just a super rare coin. I think that would be so awesome.
That is very cool, as she agrees. What kind of coin collection do you have? Is it kind of modern coins, or have you got a mix of stuff?
Yeah, it's modern coins. I really haven't gotten too deep into, really hunting out for them, because that's an expensive hobby to have.
Yeah, it is.
And so I have a lot of modern coins. There, maybe a decade ago, the U.S. started minting, quarters with every state, something from every state, and have some older rare coins, but nothing in the like rare air arena where it's like there's only one that exists in the world. I don't have anything like that.
Do you know what the oldest coin you have is?
The oldest coin I have, I think, is from 1853, 1847, something like that. It's an old dollar coin.
Yeah,
but it's not that rare because the rarest ones were minted in, I believe, the Philadelphia mint, but mine was minted in like a Colorado or Denver mint. So it's not the rarest of them, but it was older.
Yeah, Halo said she's only missing like 3 states, so that's a good collection. Oh,
Mm.
yeah, I've got a massive 1951 5 shillings coin, which is amazing. It's got King Henry slaying the dragon on the front, and it's in pristine
wow.
condition, and it's big, and it's a really thick coin. I love it, and I play with it all the time. I don't know why, but yeah, I don't collect coins, but that's a very good one. Okay, Chris, do you want a few more staple questions before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I'm struggling with the staple questions, because when Trey mentioned the suicide element and the light, that quote really stuck with me about the perseverance to find the light. And I kind of just want to probe that a little bit because I feel like it's an important topic that's never talked about. Because I'm actually writing it at the moment, and I'm similar to you. I plan the day out and everything, and I was like, that's the day I'm going to do it. And I wasn't left alone on that day, so I couldn't do it. And then I just slowly just sort of dragged myself out of a pit. And I don't think men in general talk enough about it. And obviously we've got an opportunity now where there's two, I know Chris has had his problems as well. 3 men that have all sort of been at a point where we're like, do you know what? I'm out. And yet we're all here, we're all talking, and we've gotten through it. And obviously we've got some advice there. And that quote that you said about perseverance and finding the light was beautiful. And it's like, what can we say to somebody? Let's say there's somebody listening or watching this now that thought, I'm at that point. How could we help them just in this moment? I know you can't summarize it and you've already given a beautiful quote, and that is probably what I'd say, but I feel like we should go there a little bit just because we've already kind of ventured into it.
Yeah, definitely. So the first piece is commenting on what you said. Like you planned it out, you knew how you were going to do it, you even knew the date and the time, but you weren't alone. And so a lot of times we get in those positions, in those situations, because typically isolation is a choice. We've chosen to seclude, become a recluse. And I believe it was CJ who said, Chris left for me. I know that's how it did on the title sequence. You said as writers, a lot of times there's the procrastination piece component of it, and there's the seclusion component of it, right? You just lock yourself away and you just get to your work. And that's typically a choice. When you have people in your life who, as Dr. Brene Brown says, have genuine social connection, meaning there's someone who makes you feel seen, someone who makes you feel heard, someone who makes you feel cared for, someone who genuinely has creates environment that is non-judgmental, someone who can positively enhance your life. When we have those genuine social connections, one, it's extremely hard to find ourselves in the pit. But even in the times when we do find ourselves in the pit, if we have that genuine social connection, there's someone there to sit in the pit with you and say, all right, you ready to climb out of this thing? You don't have to have a doctorate. You don't have to have a master's. You don't even have to be, mental health educated. You just have to be present. And you have to have friends in your corner like that. And for the friends who may have a friend dealing with, or may know someone who's dealing with those things. I mentioned earlier that so frequently we choose not to talk. We choose not to speak up because we feel ill-equipped to say the right thing. But being a true friend, like the realest definition of a friend, is not someone who can give you the best advice, not someone who can say these awesome one-liners or give you great quotes when you're in the pit. It's the person who doesn't know what to say, but has the courage to sit there with you while they don't. And so for someone who may be feeling that way, examine your circle. Examine your circle. Who can hold you accountable to healthy mental health, right? Positive mental health. Find someone in that circle. And if you can't, there are hotlines. don't be too proud to utilize hotlines, because what I learned the hard way is the day that I allowed my pride to die was the day that I allowed Trey to live.
Nice.
Mm.
I think one of the toughest things is in this mental health battle with men. I know, and me and Chris speak a lot about this sort of stuff, and we're open about our mental health issues. And the fact is that in the positive state, I can always say, yeah, talking's really good, and having those connections there is really good. But I think what you're saying about having that friend there is really crucial, because as soon as that kind of darkness kicks in, I just want to switch off and not talk. Like I know talking is the right answer, but when you're in there, it just seems not to be the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the key with genuine social connection. It doesn't say genuine social communication. It's a genuine social talking. Like you can't get away from the communication in this day and age, but the connection, that's what's so hard to come by. And it doesn't even have to be words. It just has to be a presence.
Yeah. Amazing.
Mm.
Any follow-up with that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I agree wholeheartedly with everything that everyone's saying in terms of social connection. I think whilst we're talking about it, I'm just going to say, I think one of the things that's really key if you're in that moment is just to literally don't see the big picture all the time. Just be in that moment. And what I've established and sort of discovered is the big picture can be terrifying. It can be horrible. Like, Trey's talked about tonight, having the dream and then it being over and having to find yourself. That's because they're massive big picture moments where you're literally putting your whole life in front of you and on view. But if you just stick in the moment and literally sometimes even bottle it down to a breath, and then you can appreciate little things in the moment, whether it's be, I'm warm, I'm safe right now, or I've got the opportunity to go and make a cup of tea or have a drink or whatever. Sometimes it's as simple as that, but that's what you need to boil it down to. And if you can do that little step at a time, then you can see the light, like Trey was saying. But yeah, I'm glad we've talked about it, because lots of different advice is great. And again, if one person listens to this and they feel better and they start to develop social connections, or they start to seek different things, then great.
Interestingly, that tattoo on my arm there says, "So give me hope in the darkness that I will see the light."
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Beautiful connections.
Isn't it?
It is. And I want to echo something that you just said, Chris. And I think it's so important when we're dealing with mental health. A lot of times, because we live in a microwave society. Everything, people want things to happen instantaneously. This is the result I wanted, and I want it now.
Yeah.
And if we think about it from a physical health perspective, if you eat one hamburger, right, you're not going to be obese after one hamburger. It takes time. It takes years of you building up and having unhealthy, diet and no exercise patterns to become overweight or to become unhealthy. You're not going to get that off with one workout. You're not going to go for one walk in the park and you're going to be that high school body again. So it's the same with mental health. Like if you're in a bad state, it's because something has happened in increments over time. And just like your physical health, your mental health, to get back to that healthy state, it's going to happen in incremental steps, in an incremental process. So don't think you're just going to step up to the plate and knock it out of the park. It's not going to happen like that. So what I want to leave in saying that is celebrate the small victories, celebrate the tiny wins, see the joy in, making one lifestyle change, changing one negative thought. Celebrate the wins, and over time you'll get this string of wins together, and you'll look up and you're going to say, wow, I'm in such a better place right now, and I didn't even know how it happened. But you celebrated the tiny wins along the way.
Brilliant.
Beautiful.
Trey, that is beautiful and amazing. And I'm sure we could talk about this for hours, but we can't because we're taking up your day. But before we do wrap it up, where can people learn about you? Where can they find out more information? Where can they follow you on social media?
Gotcha. So for the book purposes, everything will be through my publisher, Inkwell Publishers. So we're going to start pre-sales, I believe, in a couple of months. So that's from the book. On socials, it's a mixed bag, but you can generally find me at Battle Solutions. Mm-hmm. And that's all my handles, from TikTok to Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, at Battle Solutions.
Yeah, I will do my best to link those in the description of this video and send you in that direction. Like I said, on Instagram, those daily tips for resilience are perfect and kind of what I've been looking for recently. So if you're kind of feeling like you need, especially as an author, if you're pushing hard to try and do something and you're not getting the instant results like Trey's talked about, those resilience talks are really, really good. So check those out, please. Halo says, beautiful, brilliant interview. Well, thank you very much, Trey. We've thoroughly enjoyed that. So please, everybody have a great weekend. But from me, Trey, it's been a wonderful interview. It's definitely some brilliant advice in there in the mental health aspect. I will be looking out for that book of yours coming out. So thank you. Chris, anything from you?
No, just again, absolute pleasure to spend this time with you, Trey. And, thank you for your words of wisdom. And, everyone out there, I look forward to reading Trey's work in the future and everything that's to come from you. So thank you.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Cheers. Thank you, Trey. Everybody, have a great weekend. See you very soon. Bye.